Good day. My name is Ruben Denge. I have been requested to give a presentation on labor relations. And that indeed is what I'm going to do. I certainly do hope that we are going to pull through together right up until the end of this presentation. Thank you. The learning outcome. The objective of this lecture is to provide students with an in-depth understanding of the nature and operation of the South African labor regulatory environment. Now, the topics that I'm going to cover in this presentation today are as follows: the policy imperatives and the legislative framework, within South Africa as a country. And I'm going to also talk about the Labor Relations Act of 1995, the process leading to the promulgation of this particular piece of legislation, and the rationale behind the new Labor Relations Act. And I'll refer to it as new because, the kind of the labor relations environment that existed then was riddled with apartheid policies. And that indeed is the reason why it is imperative, to talk about the rationale behind it. And thereafter, I will talk about the key changes that have come about as a result of this Labor Relations Act. Then, of course, we will then talk about the employee rights, because as an employee in South Africa, you definitely do have rights. But at the same time, employers also do have rights. And that is why we are going to talk about, the employer rights as well. So it really is a balancing act. The power that the employee has must be balanced out, with the power that the employee has as well. Then I'll continue to talk about the overarching principles, surrounding the labor relations environment in the country. Then I'll talk about the dispute resolution processes, the 3 dispute resolution processes in the country. I'll focus more on that. And then, of course, I think it is also important to mention the Labor Relations Amendment Act of 2014, as well as 2018. Remember, we said this is the Labor Relations Act of 1995. And in 2014 and in 2018, there were amendments effected to this piece of legislation. Then, of course, we will then continue to talk about the Basic Conditions of Employment Amendment Act of 2018 as well. And then the last piece of legislation that one is going to be focusing on is the National Minimum Wage Act of 2018. In the history of South Africa, we've never had, a legislation that governs the national minimum wage. So in 2018, we came up with that. The objects of labor law in South Africa, it is to ensure that we promote labor peace in the workplace, because that really is of paramount importance. Because if there is no labor peace in the workplace, there definitely won't be any economic stability. Now, we need economic stability in order to ensure that the economy of the country is strong and many people are employed in the process. Because if the economy of the country is not doing well, simply because there's no labor peace in the country, then of course a number of people are going to suffer in the process. But this is usually done, through collective bargaining processes where the employers and the unions representing the employees would come together and actually negotiate. Then the second issue would really be to promote individual employment justice through the courts. That is why we have this piece of legislation. But at the same time, we also need to ensure that we promote self-actualization and industrial citizenship. Now, the main objective really is to make sure that we balance the power, as I indicated before, between the unions and the employers. Because if that power is not balanced, then obviously, it definitely is going to be too ghastly to contemplate. There is, however, one interest which management and labor have in common. It is that the inevitable and necessary conflicts should be regulated, from time to time. As you know, there usually is conflict, between management and the employees at the workplace. Now, if that conflict is not properly managed, then it will definitely deteriorate into a dispute. And that is why earlier in the introduction, I spoke about dispute resolution processes. Those come about as a result of conflict that is not properly managed at the workplace. So if that conflict is properly managed, it will most definitely not deteriorate into a dispute. And there will definitely not be a need for us to actually refer, a number of cases to the dispute resolution agencies, such as IMSA, the Labor Court, and a number of other dispute resolution agencies. There really wouldn't be a need. Thank you.